He grabbed my arm on the golf course and said, "You really want these soft hands raising your kids?" I didn't even argue. That was 2 years ago. Yesterday, his business partner called to apologize for Trevor's entire campaign to ruin my life. I'd been dating Sarah for 4 months when she finally invited me to her older brother's country club. My entire body went tense because without her brother's blessing, we would never get married. "Just warning you," she said, fixing my belt in the parking lot. "He's been my protector since our parents died. My ex in senior year pretended to be broke while draining my accounts, so now Trevor still assumes every guy is after my money." I nodded, my chest tight. What they didn't know? I owned a private jet company, but I'd learned money changes how people see you, so I kept my mouth shut and dressed casually. Trevor was already at the driving range when we arrived, and the way he looked me up and down made it clear he'd already written me off. He wore head-to-toe Ralph Lauren like he was sponsored, and his handshake was the kind meant to establish dominance. After the crushing grip, he announced my hands felt soft, like someone who'd never done real work, then asked if I even knew how to hold a club, or if Sarah would have to teach me like a child. After we teed off, he made sure I walked while he and Sarah took the cart. Throughout the first 3 holes, he kept grabbing my shoulders and repositioning them, talking to Sarah over my head about how proper lessons cost money I clearly didn't have. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from my operations team. I switched to D&D, but Trevor noticed. "Turn that thing off," he commanded. "What, DoorDash needs you back online?" He laughed at his own joke. At the 4th hole, while Sarah was lining up her putt, Trevor pulled out his phone and started showing me photos of every successful guy who was a member there, all single, all interested in Sarah. When Sarah tried to change the subject, Trevor grabbed her hand. "I understand you're settling because you're scared. Your ex David hurt you, so now you're dating down where it's safe." He looked straight at me. No offense, but she needs someone on her level. My jaw clenched as Trevor turned back to me, his confidence growing with each insult that went unchallenged. "Look at this. What happens if someone threatens you? This gonna protect you?" He grabbed my arm, squeezing my bicep. "Nothing. Probably can't even open a pickle jar." My jaw clenched as Trevor turned back to me, his confidence growing with each insult that went unchallenged. "You know what's funny?" He circled me like a predator. "Sarah's literally the only woman who'd give you a second look, and that's just because she's traumatized from our parents." He actually lifted my chin with his finger, examining my face. Things escalated when a group of women from the club walked by. Trevor literally pushed me toward them. "Ladies, quick poll. Would you date this guy?" They looked uncomfortable as he continued. "You can be honest with me. On a scale of 1 to 10, one muttered, 'Excuse me,' and they hurried away." "See?" He turned to Sarah. "Even strangers can tell he's not husband material." "Trevor, please stop," Sarah pleaded, but he was on a roll. "Let's talk about your future kids," he said, his voice getting crueler. "You really want this as their father?" He grabbed my wrist, holding it up. These soft hands teaching them to throw, this weak voice telling bedtime stories. He actually got in my face, close enough I could smell his cologne. First day of school, other kids asking why their dad looks like the substitute teacher, why daddy can't coach the little league, why mommy settled. My phone rang again. Trevor answered it before I could move, putting it on speaker with a smirk. The panicked voice of my operations manager filled the air, announcing something about a CEO furious that would given his usual jet to another client. I snatched the phone and told them to offer him the smaller citation or find another company. The words "aviation" and "Mr. Hayes, sir" echoed across the quiet golf course as I hung up on what was clearly a multi-million-dollar account. I watched Trevor's entire world crumble as he processed what he'd just heard. His face cycled from confused to horrified to utterly destroyed as every single insult came flooding back. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Aviation," he whispered. "But you can't be." Sarah connected the dots faster. "Wait a second, the house. After mom and dad died, someone paid off the mortgage anonymously." He looked up at me, tears forming. I was just protecting her, you know? I was just protecting her. You understand, right? After what happened with David, I had to test you." His voice cracked. "You get it, don't you, brother?" I just nodded and got ready to leave with Sarah, and I didn't know it at the time, but my comments had stung Trevor, and he wanted to use them to ruin everything I had ever worked for. 3 days after the golf course incident, I stood in Hayes Aviation's flagship hangar reviewing maintenance schedules when my assistant Catherine knocked on the doorframe. She held a stack of message slips, her expression puzzled. Someone had been calling repeatedly about safety concerns, refusing to leave their name but insisting it was urgent. The calls started Monday morning and increased throughout the week. Each time Catherine asked for details, the caller hung up. I took the messages and scanned through them. Different phone numbers each time, all untraceable. My stomach tightened as I recognized the pattern. Anonymous complaints were the first step in a coordinated attack on a company's reputation. I'd seen competitors try this before, but the timing felt too coincidental. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The message made my blood run cold. She wanted to know why I hadn't told her about the money from the beginning. Her brother had been filling her head with stories about wealthy men who lie to get close to vulnerable women. He'd compared me to David, her ex who'd pretended to be broke while stealing from her. The parallel stung because I knew how deeply David had wounded her trust. I tried calling Sarah back, but she didn't answer. Another text came through saying she needed time to process everything. Trevor had spent the entire morning at her apartment, showing her articles about rich men who performed poverty to manipulate women into relationships. He'd created a timeline of our relationship, highlighting every time she'd paid for dinner or I'd mentioned being careful with money. By afternoon, my phone exploded with concerned calls from clients. Someone had been posting on aviation forums and submitting reports to safety hotlines about Hayes Aviation. The posts used technical language, but contained just enough errors to seem like a concerned citizen rather than an industry professional. Each post came from different usernames, different IP addresses, but the writing style was consistent. They all questioned our maintenance standards and pilot training programs. My operations manager Jonathan burst into my office, his face flushed. A safety inspector had shown up asking detailed questions about our maintenance logs, specifically looking for any shortcuts or cost-cutting measures. The inspector mentioned receiving multiple anonymous tips about potential violations. Jonathan had provided full access to our impeccable records, but the damage was already starting. Word traveled fast in the aviation community. The inspector's questions were oddly specific, targeting areas that only someone with inside knowledge would know to ask about. Then Jonathan mentioned something that made everything click. The inspector had name-dropped his college roommate who'd recommended he look into our company personally. I remembered Trevor mentioning his college connections during one of his country club brags. That evening, I tried reaching Sarah again. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I drove to her apartment, but her car wasn't there. Emma's number was saved in my phone from Sarah's birthday dinner. When I called, she answered on the first ring, but her voice was cold. Trevor had been there too, spending hours explaining how I'd researched their family tragedy to exploit their vulnerability. He'd shown Emma my company's financial records, highlighting how I could have helped them openly, but chose deception instead. At midnight, Sarah showed up at my apartment. Her mascara was streaked, her eyes red from crying. She stood in my doorway demanding answers. What else had I lied about? Why did I hide who I was? Trevor had convinced her that everything between us was calculated manipulation. He'd shown her case studies of wealthy predators who targeted women with trust issues. I invited her in and tried to explain. The money wasn't about manipulation, but about wanting wanting to be seen for who I was, not what I owned. But every explanation sounded hollow against Trevor's poisonous narrative. Sarah listened, her arms crossed, doubt etched across her face. When I finished, she stood up. She needed space to think, time to figure out what was real. She was going to stay at Emma's house for a few days. After Sarah left, I couldn't sleep. At 5 a.m., I decided to hit my usual coffee shop to clear my head. The owner, who'd known me for years, pulled me aside. Sarah's brother had been there at 6 a.m. the previous morning, asking detailed questions. Did I come here often? What time did I usually arrive? Did I meet business contacts here? The owner thought it strange, but figured it was related to Sarah. Now I realized Trevor was mapping my routine, gathering intelligence for his next move. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The attachment made my stomach drop. It was a photo from the driving range, my face clearly visible, with liar edited in bold red letters across it. The image was already being shared in local business groups with captions questioning the integrity of Hayes Aviation's leadership. The posts linked my deception of Sarah to potential deception of clients. Throughout the week, my junior employees started mentioning new social media connections. Sarah's brother had been reaching out, striking up friendly conversations about company culture and leadership styles. His questions seemed innocent, but followed a pattern. How did I handle pressure? Did I ever push them to cut corners? Was I honest in my business dealings? The employees thought he was interested in aviation, not realizing they were being mined for ammunition. Sarah's best friend Emma called me directly. Her tone had shifted from cold to concerned. Trevor had spent another evening at her apartment, but his stories were starting to contradict themselves. He claimed I was dangerous, but couldn't explain how beyond hiding my wealth. When Emma pointed out that many people keep their finances private in new relationships, Trevor had grown agitated. He'd insisted this was different, that I'd performed poverty to trap Sarah. The security guard at the country club reached out through a mutual contact. He'd noticed something odd the day of our golf game. After we'd left, Trevor had spent over an hour in the parking lot, sitting in his car and making phone calls. The guard remembered because it was unusual for members to linger after their guests left. Looking back, Trevor had been planning his revenge from the moment he'd learned the truth. My vice president of operations scheduled an emergency meeting. We'd received 3 more calls about anonymous tips regarding our pilot training programs. The callers claimed to have inside information about pressure to rush pilots through certification. Each allegation was false but required formal documentation to refute. The pattern was clear. Trevor was escalating from personal attacks to professional warfare. Sarah's co-worker reached out to her, concerned. Trevor had stopped by their office with lunch, claiming to be worried about his sister. Trevor's really going full detective mode here, showing up at coffee shops at 6 a.m., asking when his target usually gets his morning brew. Nothing says I'm totally normal like stalking someone's caffeine schedule. Then the security guard catching him sitting in the parking lot for an hour, making phone calls after they left. That's not suspicious at all. Just a guy enjoying some quality time with his steering wheel. He'd spent an hour discussing his concerns about Sarah's relationship with someone who hid major life details. He'd framed it as protective brother behavior, but the coworker found it unsettling how prepared Trevor seemed, with printed articles and rehearsed talking points. During one of our few phone conversations, Sarah mentioned that Trevor kept referencing a timeline he'd created of our relationship. He documented every instance where she'd paid for something, every time I'd mentioned budget concerns, every moment that could be reinterpreted as manipulation. He'd turned our genuine moments into evidence of deception. Trevor's campaign intensified. He started showing up at Sarah's apartment whenever he knew I'd be there, always with urgent family business that required private discussion. Each time he'd arrive just as we were settling in for the evening, forcing me to leave so they could talk. Sarah grew increasingly frustrated, but felt obligated to hear him out. Then came the call that changed everything. A major client phoned about reconsidering our contract. They'd received concerning information from a reliable source about company leadership integrity. The source had provided detailed allegations about financial deception and questioned whether someone who lied in personal relationships could be trusted with aircraft safety. The client gave us a chance to respond, but the doubt was planted. The country club president, one of Trevor's golf buddies, suddenly developed concerns about my guest privileges. Despite Hayes Aviation servicing his tournament charters for 3 years, he questioned whether someone of questionable character should have access to the club. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. After the third major client called with safety concerns, I made a decision. I contacted a corporate security firm that specialized in reputation threats and harassment documentation. They would monitor public records, social media, and communication patterns to build a clear picture of Trevor's campaign. The process would take weeks, but I needed professional documentation of the harassment patterns. The security firm began their work immediately. They found dozens of fake social media accounts created in the past week, all following aviation industry pages and Hayes Aviation specifically. The accounts looked legitimate at first glance, but followed similar creation patterns. Each would establish credibility by commenting on general aviation topics before pivoting to subtle concerns about Hayes Aviation. Emma began pushing back against Trevor's narrative more forcefully. She noticed his stories didn't align. He claimed I was dangerous, but could only cite hiding wealth as evidence. When she asked why that made me dangerous, he'd launch into circular arguments about trust and manipulation without addressing the actual question. She started documenting their conversations, sensing something deeper at play. A pattern emerged as the security firm analyzed Trevor's activities. He wasn't attacking randomly, but targeting people Sarah trusted most. He'd spend hours building cases against me, using twisted half-truths and cherry-picked examples. With her colleagues, he focused on professional concerns. With her friends, he emphasized personal betrayal. Each audience received a customized attack designed to resonate with their specific relationship to Sarah. My head of maintenance, who'd worked with me for 10 years, warned me about strange inquiries. Trevor had been reaching out to employees, asking about pressure to cut costs or rush maintenance schedules. He posed as someone interested in the aviation industry, but his questions were too specific, too targeted. Employees who'd known me for years found the inquiries suspicious and started comparing notes. Sarah called me crying after another evening with Trevor. He'd spent hours telling her I'd probably researched her family's tragedy before we'd even met, planning how to exploit their vulnerability. He'd suggested I'd known about their parents' death and David's betrayal, using that knowledge to craft the perfect approach. The accusation was so painful because it twisted genuine connection into calculated manipulation. Emma pushed back against Trevor's narrative, pointing out the anonymous benefactor saved their family. She'd started asking uncomfortable questions about why Trevor was so determined to destroy someone who'd helped them during their darkest time. Her resistance marked the first crack in Trevor's carefully constructed campaign. Sarah's aunt called me unexpectedly. She'd been watching Trevor's behavior with growing concern. The woman had practically raised them after their parents died, and she recognized patterns in Trevor that worried her. She mentioned staying friends with Trevor's college girlfriend, who'd broken up with him due to his obsessive behavior and need for control. The aunt wondered if losing control over Sarah was triggering something similar. Trevor created fake social media accounts to comment on Hayes Aviation posts with subtle safety concerns. The security firm tracked 17 different accounts, all created within days of each other. Each account had a generic profile picture and minimal history, but they coordinated their attacks perfectly. One would question maintenance schedules, another would express concern about pilot training, creating an illusion of widespread worry among customers. I recognized the manipulation pattern matched what Sarah described David doing years ago. The isolation tactics, the constant doubt seeding, the way Trevor positioned himself as her only trustworthy protector while systematically undermining everyone else in her life. The parallels were too clear to ignore, but pointing them out would only sound defensive. The security firm discovered Trevor had been researching private aviation accidents through public records requests. He'd pulled reports from the past decade, looking for any incident involving charter services. His search history showed particular interest in maintenance-related issues and pilot error cases. He was building an arsenal of fear-inducing examples to share with potential clients. Sarah's therapist, who she'd started seeing after David's betrayal, helped her recognize the manipulation tactics. During their sessions, Sarah began connecting Trevor's current behavior to the control patterns she'd experienced before. The therapist didn't directly accuse Trevor, but guided Sarah to see the similarities herself. This professional perspective gave Sarah a framework for understanding what was happening. I screenshot and documented every fake post, comment, and anonymous complaint. My legal team advised maintaining comprehensive records of the harassment. Each piece of evidence was timestamped and archived. The folder grew thicker daily as Trevor's campaign expanded across multiple platforms and communication channels. The aviation authority confirmed the complaints were unsubstantiated, but explained they were obligated to log each one. Every anonymous tip created a permanent record that future inspectors might reference. Even baseless accusations left marks on our company's file. Trevor understood this perfectly, creating a paper trail that would haunt us for years. My senior pilots rallied around me, having witnessed my integrity over the years. They started their own documentation of Trevor's harassment, keeping logs of strange phone calls and suspicious inquiries. Several pilots offered to provide character references if needed. Their loyalty meant everything as Trevor tried to poison our reputation. The security firm's surveillance showed Trevor meeting with industry contacts at various restaurants. He'd been networking aggressively, presenting himself as a concerned citizen with inside knowledge about Hayes Aviation. The firm photographed him having lunch with competitors, regulatory officials, and industry journalists. Each meeting lasted over an hour, with Trevor doing most of the talking. Sarah's aunt mentioned she'd stayed friends with Trevor's college girlfriend, who was concerned about his obsessive behavior patterns resurfacing. The ex-girlfriend revealed that Trevor had exhibited similar controlling behavior in college, monitoring her friendships and creating detailed timelines of her activities. She'd ended the relationship when his possessiveness became unbearable. Instead of fighting back publicly, I continued normal operations. Every flight departed on time, every maintenance check exceeded standards, every client interaction remained professional. I refused to let Trevor's attacks change how we operated. Excellence would speak louder than any defense I could mount. Sarah's lease renewal approached, and Trevor pressured her to move back home for safety. He'd prepared a room for her, even buying new furniture without asking. His arguments centered on protecting her from my supposed manipulation, while conveniently placing her back under his direct supervision. The pressure intensified daily as the renewal deadline approached. During an argument with Sarah, Trevor accidentally referenced exact phrases from their private conversations. Sarah realized he'd been documenting or possibly recording everything they discussed. This revelation shook her deeply. The brother she trusted had been treating their relationship like a surveillance operation. At a family dinner, Trevor's mask slipped when Sarah defended me. His wife witnessed a vicious side she'd never seen before. Trevor's face contorted with rage as he accused Sarah of betraying their parents' memory. His wife sat frozen, watching her husband transform into someone she didn't recognize. The outburst lasted several minutes before Trevor regained control. Trevor offered Sarah $50,000 to leave me and start fresh somewhere else. He presented it as a gift of freedom, a chance to escape my influence. Sarah was horrified by the bribe, recognizing it as an attempt to buy control over her life. She refused immediately, but Trevor kept insisting the offer would remain open. His wife started questioning why Trevor spent more time destroying me than running his own business. She'd noticed him staying up late researching aviation regulations, making phone calls at odd hours, and neglecting important contracts. Their business partners had started complaining about his absence from crucial meetings. Timeline analysis revealed Trevor's business was failing before my anonymous loan saved them. The security firm uncovered financial records showing Trevor's company had been months from bankruptcy when the mysterious mortgage payment arrived. He'd hidden this from Sarah, maintaining a facade of success while desperately juggling creditors. Only Trevor's golf buddies and a few business contacts still believed his narrative. Most of Sarah's friends saw through his tactics, especially after Emma started sharing her observations. The tide was turning as more people recognized Trevor's obsessive behavior as unhealthy rather than protective. The security firm's surveillance showed Trevor entering our biggest competitor's headquarters 3 times in 1 week. They captured clear photos with timestamps, showing him carrying folders and meeting with senior executives. Whatever information he was sharing, our competitors were interested enough to grant multiple meetings. My CFO received an invitation from Trevor for drinks to discuss mutual opportunities. The message hinted at inside information about Hayes Aviation that might interest someone looking to change companies. My CFO refused immediately, forwarding the message to me as evidence of Trevor's attempted corporate espionage. His loyalty never wavered despite whatever Trevor was offering. Sarah and I had an honest conversation about trust, money, and deception. Oh wow, Trevor's going from weekend detective to full-time stalker with benefits. The guy's spending more time tracking his sister than actually running his business. I bet his wife's wondering if she married a CEO or a really expensive private eye. She acknowledged her confusion and hurt, while I explained my fears about being valued only for wealth. We discussed David's impact on both our lives and how his betrayal had shaped our behaviors. The conversation was painful but necessary, rebuilding understanding between us. I refused to use my wealth to destroy Trevor despite having every capability. My legal team had prepared several options for aggressive counteraction, but I declined them all. Maintaining moral high ground mattered more than revenge. I wouldn't become the monster Trevor was painting me as. During a heated phone call that Sarah overheard, Trevor accidentally admitted he was trying to force me to reveal my true nature. He believed everyone with money was inherently corrupt and was determined to expose what he saw as my inevitable darkness. His admission revealed the depth of his prejudice and paranoia. Documentation showed Trevor had filed 12 formal complaints across different agencies plus dozens of anonymous tips. The coordination required was staggering. He'd researched each agency's reporting requirements, tailored complaints to their specific jurisdictions, and maintained detailed records of each submission. This wasn't emotional reaction, but calculated warfare. His wife found his obsession files while looking for tax documents. She discovered binders full of printed emails, photos, timeline charts, and research about me. The depth of his vendetta disturbed her. She'd known he was upset about Sarah's relationship, but hadn't grasped the consuming nature of his fixation. Employees started sharing their own stories of my integrity, creating organic pushback against Trevor's narrative. They posted on social media about fair treatment, generous mentorship, and ethical business practices they'd witnessed. These testimonials carried weight because they came from people with nothing to gain by defending me. Several clients personally called to express support, having worked with Hayes Aviation for years without incident. They'd received Trevor's anonymous warnings, but dismissed them based on their actual experiences. One CEO mentioned that the desperate nature of the attacks actually reinforced his confidence in our company. Sarah's birthday dinner became a direct confrontation when Trevor couldn't explain why helping his family was manipulation. He'd prepared talking points about my deception, but when family members asked why paying their mortgage was harmful, he struggled to respond. His arguments crumbled when faced with the simple reality of generous assistance. Family friends who'd known them since their parents died started questioning Trevor's mental state and motives. They'd watched him transform from protective brother to obsessive controller. Several pulled Sarah aside to express concern about Trevor's behavior, validating her growing doubts about his campaign. Trevor's business partners noticed he was neglecting work for his vendetta. Important contracts went unsigned, client meetings were missed, and strategic planning sessions proceeded without him. They threatened to buy him out if he couldn't refocus on their company. The ultimatum forced Trevor to choose between his obsession and his livelihood. Sarah's aunt revealed she told Trevor about the anonymous benefactor 2 years ago. He'd known all along who'd saved their family, but had hidden this from Sarah. This deception shattered Sarah's trust more than anything else. Trevor had let her wonder and worry while knowing the truth. I ensured no Hayes Aviation employees retaliated against Trevor despite provocation. When some pilots suggested their own social media campaign against him, I shut it down immediately. We would maintain professional standards regardless of Trevor's tactics. Protecting our company's reputation meant taking the high road. Sarah's extended family rallied around her right to choose her own partner. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd initially stayed neutral began speaking up. They'd seen enough of Trevor's behavior to recognize it as controlling rather than protective. Family gatherings became supportive spaces for Sarah rather than interrogation sessions. Trevor's fake social media accounts got flagged and removed by platforms. The coordinated nature of the posts triggered automated detection systems. His digital warfare campaign collapsed as account after account disappeared. The sudden silence was almost as telling as the attacks had been. His wife witnessed Trevor screaming at Sarah about betraying the family by staying with me. The verbal assault happened during what was supposed to be a calm discussion. Trevor's wife intervened, physically placing herself between the siblings. She'd never seen her husband so unhinged, and it frightened her. Former employees came forward about my fair treatment and generous mentorship over the years. People who'd moved on to other companies shared stories about how I'd supported their career growth. These testimonials came unsolicited, spreading through industry networks. Trevor's narrative couldn't compete with years of accumulated goodwill. Bank records Sarah could legally access showed Trevor had been monitoring her trust fund weekly. He'd set up alerts for any significant transactions and regularly checked the balance. This financial surveillance predated my relationship with Sarah by years. His obsession with her money was long-standing, not triggered by my arrival. Sarah's lease expired, and she chose to move in with me. The decision represented clear independence from Trevor's control. She signed the papers despite his protests, threats, and bribes. Moving trucks arrived as Trevor made one last desperate attempt to change her mind, but Sarah held firm. Community members who'd benefited from Hayes Aviation's charity work spoke up about company values. We'd quietly supported youth aviation programs, veteran pilot training, and emergency medical flights. These contributions had never been publicized, but recipients remembered. Their voices added weight to our defense. The stakes clarified as Trevor faced losing his sister forever if he continued. Sarah had drawn clear boundaries, warning that his behavior was destroying their relationship. He could choose his vendetta or his family, but not both. The ultimatum forced him to confront the cost of his obsession. I handled a genuine company crisis with transparency when an aircraft needed emergency maintenance. Rather than hide the issue, we immediately contacted affected clients, explained the situation, and arranged alternatives. Our handling of real problems proved Trevor's safety concerns were fabricated. Actual challenges were met with honesty, not the deception he'd predicted. Business associates distanced themselves from Trevor as his behavior became increasingly erratic. Former allies stopped returning his calls. Golf buddies made excuses to avoid him. His professional network crumbled as word spread about his harassment campaign. Social isolation reinforced his spiral. Truth prevailed as person after person refused to believe Trevor's increasingly desperate lies. His stories became more elaborate and less credible. Claims about my supposed crimes grew so outlandish that even sympathetic listeners recognized them as fantasies. The more he pushed, the less people believed. Sarah chose to move in with me, marking clear independence from Trevor's control. She arranged the move while Trevor was traveling for business, avoiding another confrontation. When he returned to find her gone, the reality of his failure hit hard. His protective mission had driven away the person he'd claimed to protect. Trevor crashed Emma's birthday dinner uninvited, trying to turn Sarah's friends against me. He arrived with prepared speeches about my deception, but the room turned cold when he entered. Emma asked him to leave immediately. When he refused, other guests formed a protective barrier around Sarah. His dramatic entrance became a humiliating exit. Friends shut down his manipulation, having seen through his tactics completely. They'd compared notes about his visits, recognized his patterns, and agreed to support Sarah. When Trevor tried to divide them, he found a united front. Years of friendship proved stronger than his poisonous whispers. Trevor's investors pulled out after learning he'd been neglecting business for personal vendetta. Due diligence revealed the extent of his distraction. Contracts had lapsed, opportunities were missed, and financial projections were fantasy. They withdrew funding, leaving Trevor's company in crisis. Sarah and I grew stronger through the ordeal. Her trust rebuilt slowly as she watched me handle crisis with grace. Every attack met with patience, every lie countered with truth. She saw who I really was under pressure, and it deepened our connection. Trevor's campaign had the opposite effect he'd intended. My competitors who'd met with Trevor testified to his attempted corporate espionage. When confronted by industry associations, they admitted Trevor had offered inside information about Hayes Aviation. They'd listened, but ultimately refused to act on his intelligence. Professional ethics prevailed over competitive advantage. Complete documentation of Trevor's harassment was presented to his wife and business partners. The security firm compiled everything into a comprehensive report. Fake social media accounts, recorded threats, timeline of attacks, attempted corporate espionage, everything laid out chronologically. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Trevor's own actions proved I'd been truthful while he'd been deceptive. Every accusation he'd made reflected his own behavior. He'd lied about knowing the benefactor's identity. He'd manipulated Sarah's trust. He'd deceived family and friends. His campaign revealed more about his character than mine. His wife revealed she'd been documenting his obsessive behavior, considering intervention. She'd kept notes about late-night research sessions, recorded his increasingly angry rants, and photographed the obsession files. Her documentation provided inside perspective on Trevor's deterioration. She'd been preparing to protect herself and their children from his instability. The aviation community rallied around Hayes, sharing positive experiences spanning years. Industry forums filled with testimonials about our integrity. Competitors publicly stated they'd found no merit in anonymous complaints. Professional organizations reaffirmed our standing. Trevor had united the industry in our defense. I organized organized all documentation of Trevor's harassment into a clear timeline. The security firm's reports, false complaints, witness statements, everything compiled into one comprehensive file. The evidence painted an undeniable picture of systematic harassment driven by jealousy and financial desperation. Trevor's inner circle staged an intervention at his house. His wife, business partners, and closest friends gathered to confront him about his destructive obsession. They'd each witnessed different aspects of his behavior and compared notes. The meeting started calmly, but Trevor's defensiveness quickly escalated the tension. Cornered by evidence and testimony, Trevor made his most desperate move yet. He claimed to have proof about Sarah's parents' death that somehow implicated me. His voice shook as he promised documentation that would expose everything. The room fell silent as everyone processed this shocking escalation. His proof turned out to be a fabricated maintenance record suggesting Hayes Aviation had existed when their parents died in a small plane crash. The forgery was clumsy, dates clearly altered, company letterhead obviously fake. Simple fact-checking revealed Hayes Aviation was founded 3 years after their parents' death. Oh, Trevor, buddy. I mean, trying to fake maintenance records but getting the dates wrong by 3 whole years? His wife's been taking notes this whole time too, probably thinking, I married this guy? While he's up at 2 a.m. making conspiracy boards like he's hunting Bigfoot. Trevor's desperation had driven him to create evidence that could be disproven with basic research. Sarah wavered when she first saw the forged document. The trauma of losing her parents resurfaced, making her momentarily vulnerable to Trevor's manipulation. Even knowing the dates made it impossible, the suggestion alone reopened old wounds. I watched her struggle between logic and emotion, while Trevor pressed his advantage. I made the decision to open Hayes Aviation's complete historical records. Corporate registration documents, founding papers, first employee contracts, everything that proved our company didn't exist when their parents died. The transparency was necessary to counter Trevor's poisonous suggestion before it spread through the family. The public records clearly showed Hayes Aviation was incorporated 3 years after the accident. Tax filings, business licenses, aviation authority registrations all confirmed the timeline. Trevor's lie collapsed under the weight of verifiable facts. His forgery attempt only highlighted his desperation and willingness to exploit family tragedy. Sarah's aunt called a family gathering at her house. Everyone needed to face the truth together. Extended family members arrived throughout the afternoon, sensing the gravity of the situation. The living room filled with cousins, aunts, uncles, all concerned about the family crisis Trevor had created. Trevor arrived last, still clutching his fabricated evidence. He launched into his prepared narrative about my supposed involvement in their parents' death. The room listened in uncomfortable silence as he wove conspiracy theories and circumstantial connections. His presentation grew more frantic as family members exchanged skeptical glances. I countered with the documented timeline of events, corporate records, dated photographs, employment histories that proved Hayes Aviation's founding date. Each piece of evidence was passed around the room, examined by family members who understood the implications. Trevor's forgery looked even more pathetic compared to authentic documents. The truth about Trevor's financial situation emerged during the confrontation. His business had been failing for years before my anonymous mortgage payment. He'd hidden mounting debts while maintaining a successful facade. The family learned he'd been desperately trying to access Sarah's trust fund as collateral for new investors. Trevor's wife produced her phone, revealing recordings she'd made over recent weeks. His voice filled the room, admitting his jealousy-driven vendetta against me. In one recording, he explicitly stated his plan to destroy me for exposing his failures at the golf course. The family heard him acknowledge knowing I was the anonymous benefactor while plotting to turn Sarah against me. I faced a choice between destroying Trevor with the accumulated evidence or showing mercy to Sarah's only sibling. The documentation could end his business partnerships, his marriage, his standing in the community. Every instinct pushed toward unleashing the evidence, but I remembered Sarah's love for her brother despite everything. I presented the full documentation to the family without demanding specific action. Security reports, false complaints, witness statements, surveillance photos, everything laid out for them to see. The evidence spoke for itself without my commentary. Family members could draw their own conclusions about Trevor's behavior. The family absorbed the complete picture of Trevor's campaign. His greed, jealousy, and willingness to destroy their benefactor became undeniable. Aunts who'd defended him fell silent. Cousins who'd remained neutral shook their heads in disgust. The uncle who'd questioned my motives apologized directly. Trevor made one final manipulation attempt, suggesting he might harm himself if Sarah didn't leave me. The threat was vague, but calculated to trigger protective instincts. His wife immediately intervened, recognizing the manipulation tactic from their own relationship struggles. She positioned herself between Trevor and the family, making it clear she wouldn't enable his behavior. The family refused to give in to Trevor's emotional blackmail. They'd seen enough manipulation to recognize this latest tactic. Sarah's aunt spoke for everyone, stating they would support Trevor getting help, but wouldn't enable his destructive behavior. The unified response left Trevor without leverage. Victory felt hollow as I watched Sarah's family fracture around us. We'd saved my company and preserved our relationship, but the cost was evident in Sarah's eyes. Her only sibling had revealed himself as someone willing to destroy her happiness for his own agenda. No amount of business success could compensate for that loss. Trevor finally admitted defeat, his shoulders sagging as the fight drained from him. Surrounded by evidence of his lies and manipulation, he agreed to seek therapy. His wife made it clear this was non-negotiable if their marriage would continue. He nodded silently, understanding he'd pushed everyone to their limits. His business partners moved forward with buying out his share of their company. The documentation of his neglect and erratic behavior made the decision easy. Trevor would receive fair compensation, but lose the business he'd built. Starting over would be humbling for someone who defined himself through success. Sarah and I began building our new life together, shaped by the ordeal we'd survived. The experience had stripped away pretenses and revealed core truths about everyone involved. We were sadder but wiser about family dynamics and the destructive power of jealousy. Our foundation was stronger for having weathered Trevor's assault. The extended family acknowledged my role in saving them years ago. Aunts and uncles who'd questioned my motives now offered genuine gratitude. They understood I'd helped without seeking recognition, the opposite of Trevor's accusations. The acknowledgement came with invitations to family gatherings and acceptance into their circle. Moving forward meant establishing new boundaries with Trevor. Sarah made it clear he needed to respect our relationship and maintain appropriate distance. Contact would be limited until he demonstrated genuine change through therapy. The boundaries were firm, but left room for potential reconciliation if Trevor did the work. Hayes Aviation emerged from the crisis with our reputation intact. Clients who'd stood by us during the harassment campaign became even more loyal. Employees who'd witnessed my response to Trevor's attacks felt increased confidence in company leadership. The aviation community's support had been overwhelming and wouldn't be forgotten. Trevor's therapy journey began with resistance, but gradually led to self-awareness. His therapist specialized in narcissistic behavior patterns and family dynamics. Early sessions focused on understanding how his need for control had poisoned his relationship with Sarah. Progress was slow, but measurable. Our wedding planning proceeded without Trevor's involvement. Sarah chose Emma as her maid of honor, surrounding herself with friends who'd supported her through the crisis. The guest list included family members who'd stood by us and business associates who'd rejected Trevor's lies. It would be smaller than originally envisioned, but filled with genuine supporters. Trevor sent a letter 6 months into his therapy, acknowledging his behavior without excuses. He admitted to jealousy over my success and fear of losing control over Sarah. The letter didn't ask for forgiveness, but expressed understanding of the damage he'd caused. Sarah read it several times before filing it away. Life settled into new patterns without Trevor's constant presence. Sarah flourished without his oppressive protection, making decisions based on her own judgment. Our relationship deepened through shared trust and mutual respect. The crisis had tested us and proven our commitment to each other. Trevor's former business struggled without him, but survived under his partner's leadership. They occasionally updated us on his progress, maintaining distant contact out of respect for shared history. He'd found work with a smaller firm, starting over without the status he'd once flaunted. The humbling experience seemed to be part of his growth process. A year after the confrontation, Sarah and I married in an intimate ceremony. The wedding was perfect in its simplicity, surrounded by people who'd proven their loyalty. Trevor sent a genuine apology letter, but respected our need for distance. He was rebuilding his life through therapy and hard work, no longer able to access his sister's trust fund or control her choices. Our marriage thrived on the foundation of trust built through adversity. Sarah's family relationships had forever changed, but became more honest. My company continued growing, strengthened by the loyalty shown during Trevor's attacks. The price of truth had been high, but we'd emerged with something unshakable. Trevor's campaign had failed to destroy what we'd built together, instead revealing the strength of genuine connections over manipulative control. Trevor went from tough guy to therapy patient writing apology letters. We love to see that. I love how he sent a letter to the wedding but stayed away. Like, hey, congrats on the marriage I tried to destroy. Here's a nice card. That's it for this video though. Hopefully this commentary wasn't too distracting and you guys didn't hate it. Thank you all for watching.